our Zoom congregation as well. A couple of things for our people in person. We are still following guidelines, as you are well aware. And so we will continue our sort of informed decision to have very limited singing in terms of the congregation. So what I'm going to ask the congregation to do is when we have different songs, I'm going to ask you to stand. We're going to do some clapping. And also you'll be humming in 3 different languages today. So that'll be a challenge. And folks at home on Zoom will be invited to join with us as well. I wanted to also say, I'm going to be experimenting a little bit with sound today. And so I ask your forbearance. I'm mic'd and ready for Zoom. So I'm kind of going to be moving between Zoom and live and so forth. And so there are 1,000 ways I can make mistakes. So just be ready. And we assure you that the sound like the wonderful sound that we've envisioned for this space and for our remote worshipers will be in place very soon. We're very excited about that. Yes. So this is a wonderful day to be here. It's a special day in the life of our congregation, and I'm delighted to be with you, to sing with you. Our gathering hymn or song is composed of 3 words from Zulu, from a traditional Zulu greeting. So the beginning word is sawabona, and I would ask you to just repeat that, sawabona, and that means I see you. Then the traditional response is sikona, I am here. And then finally, the concept Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. And so our choir, I invite everyone to rise and hum. Our choir will sing the words.
Page 10 of the front matter in Singing the Living Tradition, the UU hymn book, contains a statement of principles and purposes. Unitarian Universalists gather in covenant, affirm the statements, and promote our touchstones, commonly known as the 7 principles. These principles are dearly beloved and align with most religious traditions' statement of doctrine, faith, and belief. For UUs, the principles serve as statements of conviction, belief, conscience, practice, and for some, theology. The principles draw many people to our faith. Time has come for the 8th principle, which concentrates our attention on the notion of beloved community, of transforming the notion of beloved community into a reality. Today's service jumpstarts the affirmation process for the 8th principle in this congregation. Since this church has been on the forefront of social justice, racial reconciliation, and truth-telling for many years, we're now ready to take the next steps. This 8th principle service lays the foundation for transforming our community into a mecca of multiculturalism for all who enter our doors. Members of the 8th principle and multicultural awareness teams and one of the 8th principle founders join me today in leading us in worship. May it be so.
Good morning. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in saying our church's affirmation of covenant and humming in English and Spanish as the choir sings the doxologies. Love is the content of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Cruces. We welcome those of you who are joining us in the sanctuary, as well as those who are joining us via Zoom technology. As you heard, our minister, Reverend Kalani Kachela, is in the pulpit today, and later he will be joined by our guest speaker, Paula Cole-Jones. I am Maggie Locatelli, and along with other members of the 8th Principal Project Team and the Multicultural Study Group, we are the service associates for the service. We are very pleased and privileged to be with part of this service with you today. Unitarian Universalism has no creed or dogma. We are a covenant-based church, meaning that we agree to live in relationship with each other according to the Unitarian Universalist principles and our congregation's covenant of right relations. We embrace diversity in all its forms. Everyone is welcome. If you would like to learn more about our church, please go to our website, uuchurchlc.org. If you are visiting us today, we'd like to meet you. If you're here in the sanctuary, please rise, embody your spirit, introduce yourself by telling us your name, where you are from, and how you heard about our church. As yet, we do not have a wireless microphone. Sounds like I have verbal dyslexia today. A wireless microphone, so please speak up and as loudly as possible. Do we have visitors with us today?
I'm James Armstrong and Nancy Armstrong.
Welcome.
Good morning, my name is Paula Somerville, and I'm fairly new to last Cruces. I think it's only the third time I've been out to church, and I did. I came from Silver City before.
Welcome. And yes.
Before we were not around here, so like someone from the
Welcome. Thank you all. And do we have any visitors via Zoom? Any Zooming visitors? It sounds like not. But whether or perhaps you're a shy visitor, please leave your information on a visitor's card in the lobby. And if you're visiting us via Zoom, please leave your information in the chat box so we can invite all of you to future activities and services at the church. Today I have these announcements. Religious Education will be hosting a trunk or treat Sunday next week, the 31st of October. We are currently looking for up to 8 volunteers to host a trunk for treating. Details for the event were sent out on last week's weekly announcements. For those interested, please get in touch with Kelly Ingram, our Director of Religious Education. We have entered our pledge drive season, and by now you probably have received mailing, including pledge cards and return envelopes. If you haven't yet, please fill out your pledge card and send it in. Speedy responses will make budgeting for the coming year a smooth process, Very important when we are all setting our sails to 2022. And now Katie Fitzgerald has an announcement about the auction.
Today, I'm not wearing a hat. I brought a prop instead. This poor fellow is a jack-o'-lantern. He started life as a pumpkin, and his name was Philip. And he's here to remind you all that next Saturday, from 9 to noon, we are going to have a pancake breakfast. P is the letter that's very important because the people, starts with P, in this congregation will gather for some fun, hopefully, and some good food. My husband Bill is working on his pumpkin, another P, recipe for pancakes. He also will have vegan and gluten-free and plain old American pancakes. In addition, we are going to have music provided by the Lush Life Quintet and a silent auction. Lots and lots of items which you can peruse once you leave today's worship service. If you're leaving us right after worship, as you exit the door, the tables are lined up with all of the bidding sheets just for you to view. Or after today's congregational meeting, you can do the same. You can get your bids in early. We want you to bid early and often. The great thing about the Pancake Breakfast is the opportunity to be together. And it all culminates with a live auction of some of your favorites. Maggie's Muffins, doesn't start with P, too bad, but it does. They are delicious. And of course, we have a couple of cheesecakes by our minister. They will be up for auction as well. Hope to see you all there. And poor Philip, alas, he will be part of the pumpkin pancakes.
There's also my pies, so don't forget that. It starts with P. It's all right. It's okay. Just getting a plug in, you know, I can't help it. Okay. Today's service is focused on the 8th principle. Most of you know about the proposed addition, which Marie just read as our chalice lighting. From our updates and articles in the light, previous worship services, and the Casita meetings, which focused on this important subject. The 8th principle is a commitment for action to dismantle racism and other oppressions. The board will hold a vote regarding the adoption of the 8th principle by this congregation after the service. Between the conclusion of our service and the congregational vote, you will have a brief time to fellowship with one another. If you are on Zoom, you'll be placed in a chat room. If you're here in the sanctuary, you'll have 15 minutes to grab a cup of coffee and a treat provided by the hospitality committee. What's important is that you show up for the vote if you are a member of this church, whether in person or via Zoom, your vote will be counted. Also, there's a lot going on today. After you vote, you can go, there is a pop-up show in the gallery of Chris Northcutt's craft work. And it also sounds like you can do early bidding on the auction items. Our eagerness to reconnect with one another may feel stymied or softened a bit as we adjust to multiple changes. It is important to keep in mind that all the new normals we are adopting are in place to support our communal attempts to safeguard one another. Thank you all for being here today.
What is the 8th principle? Well, you know our 7 principles, right? They're things that matter to us, things that guide how we are as a community, how we treat each other, and what we want to bring more of into the world. Just like each of us is always learning and growing, we know our principles have to grow sometimes too. This is the story of the 8th principle. A few years ago, some UU leaders spoke up. They told us these principles we love, they left something out. Like many who'd come before them, they spoke about how people still aren't being treated fairly because of the color of their skin, or where they come from, or other things that make them who they are. And that happens not only in the world at large, but even in our congregations, even in this one. So we need to do more to make sure that all people can feel welcome and loved here. We need to say more about our commitments to fight against racism, because racism hurts everybody. In fact, it hurts all 7 of our principles. And so, the 8th principle was born. The 8th principle is a commitment to fight against racism and oppression, and to build a beloved community of love and trust and belonging here in our church and in the world around us. We're going to be talking about the 8th principle a lot this spring, learning about it and what it means for this community. What does the 8th principle mean to you?
Alleluia. I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, hum with great conviction as the choir sings.
speaking of joys, sorrows, and milestones. In these challenging times, it is crucial that we make attempts to stay connected with one another. Our church's website has a link which allows you to confidentially submit a joy, sorrow, or milestone to the minister. You can specify if you would like your submission shared with the caring team and/or the congregation, or if you prefer that your submission remain confidential. I have one joy this morning. As a representative of the choir, I'd like to welcome back Catherine. Our music director, who is on sabbatical in France. We are so glad that you had a fantastic time and that you are back with us safe and healthy. As human beings sharing this planet at this time in history, we all carry hopes and dreams, wounds and worries in our hearts. Remembering this, let us treat one another with patience and love.
I'd like to invite you for a moment of prayer and meditation. Today, our prayer comes from my colleague, the Reverend Gretchen Haley. For this one moment, know that you are loved, that you are safe and whole and loved. Know that you belong here, here among us, here upon this earth, in your body. However tired or broken your heart may be, whatever fear, disappointment, anger you carry. For this hour, know you are not alone. Feel the presence of others surrounding you, breathing beside you and with you, discovering together the way our voices rise and fall together in harmony, in hope. Claim here a resilient freedom, the choice for love, for light, to live with joy and gratitude and praise as a form of resistance. We hold these and the prayers of our hearts into the silence. We ask this prayer and meditation in the name of all persons present and absent, known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, and all helpers of humankind. Ashe, amen, and may it be so. Well, now I want to introduce to you all our guest speaker today, Paula Cole-Jones. It's possible to get Paula on the screen spotlighted so we can see her. Paula Cole-Jones is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist and a management consultant with over 20 years of experience in designing and facilitating workshops and dialogues for leaders and organizations. She is an innovator of institutional change. In 1999, Paula founded Adjourn, a dialogue on race and ethnicity. Her work includes being a leader in the advancing the eighth principle and the community of communities as practices of the beloved community. Paula is the author of a UU World magazine cover story, Reconciliation as a Spiritual Discipline. She is also the editor of a Skinner House book, Encounters, Poems about Race, Ethnicity, and Identity, and a contributing author of 3 Skinner House books, including the UUA Common Read, Justice on Earth. I have known Paula for many years. We first met when I was the Minister of Pastoral Care at the the First Unitarian Church of Dallas. And we collaborated on some work around multiculturalism. Paula was one of the first UUs to read my book on exemplary faith, which became the book titled Get a Hold of Yourself. We last saw each other in person in 2019 at the annual retreat for UU professionals of color called Finding Your Way Home. And she and I had a lovely lunch together with another exemplary UU named Tequina Boston. Following Rabbit Loring's reflection, Paula joins us this morning from her home in Washington, D.C. for a dialogue with me about the eighth principle and the benefits of adopting it in this congregation.
Good morning. The multicultural group and the eighth principle team took on the challenge of writing the stories of our journeys toward anti-racism. Several of these stories have been condensed into short paragraphs. What I'm going to read now is a shorter version of what you received at the door, entitled, "I Am Not a Racist." We hope these stories will inspire you to see yourself in this often difficult journey toward the beloved community that we strive for. I am not a racist. I had a Black college roommate. My family had Asian, Hispanic, Black housekeepers. I marched for civil rights in the 60s. I didn't flee the city when it began to be integrated. I hired Black employees. I took classes in multiculturalism. I joined anti-racist organizations. I adopted a Black, Hispanic, Asian child. I can't possibly be a racist. I would like to tell you a story of how I bravely stood up against racism and championed the rights of the oppressed. But I'm going to tell you a true story instead. For 3 years, the high school I taught at had a Black principal. One afternoon, I stepped out of my classroom and looked down the hallway to see a large, young Black man dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, crouching down next to the office. I felt distinct anxiety moments before he stood up and I recognized our principal. In my high school in the 60s, there was racial tension as the Black kids tried to educate and raise the awareness of the white kids. I felt tense when I talked to the Black kids because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I knew anti-racism was important, but I didn't know how I could fit in or how to talk to people who were different from me. In the fall of 1970, my workplace in Chicago was a few blocks from where many were killed by police when the Black Panther headquarters was raided the year before. Racial tensions were high. I had almost no contact with any African-American people growing up. This was the first time I realized that I held fear-based prejudices deep inside my psyche. I was hyper-aware of people's color and was especially anxious about the proximity of Black men. I worked closely with a Black single mother of 2 boys. As the boys grew into adulthood, I thought about how I might have reacted if I didn't know them and saw either of them walking down the street toward me. I would have crossed to the other side of the street. When I am totally honest with myself, I have to admit that I love and accept all people, as long as they're enough like me that I can feel comfortable with them and don't have to adjust my behavior too much. But that's not fair to them, and it prevents me from learning and growing in my understanding and experiences. White supremacy isn't just guys with hoods and torches. It's the assumption that the way white people traditionally do things is normal and right, and the way others do things is wrong. I once observed a person turn on someone of her own minority cultural identity and nearly destroy her life. At first, I was filled with raging anger. I asked myself, how could this person who had experienced so much oppression herself do something so hurtful to another person of her own cultural identity? I wanted to tell her how wrong this was, but I called on a couple of people of her culture for whom she had deep respect, asking them to have some caring conversations about what was taking place. The outcome was a miracle. Eventually, she came forward to say she had made a bad mistake and would try never to repeat it. If I had attacked her with my righteous anger, that healing would never have taken place. Now I understand why it's so important to take a public stand for justice, to be a true ally when BIPOC people are receiving unfair treatment without blaming, shaming, or judging others. I know I will continue to make mistakes myself, trying to support an environment of cultural inclusion, but I'm going to try hard to admit them and ask for forgiveness and forgive myself so I will not make the same mistakes again. The point is not to brag about how perfect we are, but to realize how imperfect we are and to have something to strive for. It's about being warm, accepting people, actively promoting anti-racism, actively working to dismantle racism in all its forms, in our community and in ourselves. This is just the beginning. Now we join together to co-create our next steps. Adopting the 8th principle will give members of our congregation tangible guidance on ways to evolve our thinking so that we can become the change we want to see in the world.
Thank you, Rabbit, for that beautiful reflection, and to all the members of the teams who assembled those writings and those reflections and did the deep work of looking inwardly and sharing your experiences with us. Well, I had the opportunity to talk with Paula Cole-Jones by phone, and we meet on Zoom occasionally in other meetings a few times as we began to prepare for the service today. And during one of the conversations, she suggested that we do a dialogue rather than preaching to the congregations. She had done a similar dialogue at Cedar Lane UU Church, where the minister Abi Janamachi and Katie Romano Griffin are ministers. And after watching that dialogue on YouTube, I certainly agree with her that that would be a good way to do it. So today I'm going to have a seat here, and I'm going to ask Paula questions, and you'll see her on the monitor, and we'll go back and forth talking about the eighth principle. Good morning, Paula.
There. Good morning. It's good to see you and to be a part of your congregation today.
I'm just waiting for them to put you on the screen and highlight Paula, please. Okay. Well, we're glad that you're joining us from your home there in DC. And as I said earlier, we haven't seen each other face to face in person in a couple of years, so it's good to see you. We have seen each other on various Zoom meetings for the UUA. So I want to start off by asking you a question that I think gets to the heart of this process of us adopting and affirming the eighth principle, which is, why should the people of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces care about adopting the eighth principle, and what's in it for them?
Yeah. So just from what I've heard so far, it sounds like you care. You already care about it. The eighth principle is about fulfilling the promise of Unitarian Universalism. And I think we are just scratching the surface of something amazing that really it has not been fully accessible in the eighth principle and some other things that are happening in the world today and in our association are kind of moving us in a new direction, or more fully in a direction that we've been traveling slowly. You should care, because we care about the future of Unitarian Universalism. We care about our relevance today, and we care about the faith journey of young people who are growing up Unitarian Universalists. The eighth principle really does speak to the world that we live in. It matters not only to the people who are already here, but to people who would be seeking a progressive spiritual community. And the eighth principle, I think, gives us a much wider welcome than just assuming that it's understood. I think it's helpful for us to revisit the mid-'80s, when the principles, pretty much as we have them now, were adopted. That was an effort that was led by women. And you can read more about this in a UU World article. But it was an effort led by women to remove the male-dominant language so that our principles and our guiding documents were inclusive from a gender perspective. There's no doubt that that was an outcome from what was happening nationally in terms of the women's movement. And so our association responded in that way. 12 years later, in 1997, our General Assembly voted to become an anti-racist association. That was almost 25 years ago, but we never went back and reflected that in our principles. I think we have learned more about inclusion in the past 25 years than we had learned all of the years before. And it's time for us just to do an update. I see this as an update to our principles. Now, Reverend Kalani, I want to ask you a question because your work on faith exemplars, had an impact on me years ago when I read it. And as I was thinking about it, preparing for today, our work around building the beloved community, I think that faith exemplars, it certainly described how I see myself in this work. But I think it provides language and concepts for other people to see their role in building the beloved community. And I'd like for you to say something about that.
Well, I wrote a book called Get a Hold of Yourself, which Paul is referring to, where I expanded on this term of faith exemplars. And it comes from this idea that people who are exemplary in their faith live according to their principles, their convictions, and their deep beliefs about how life ought to be, rather than just having these as things they think about, but actually live them out. And I believe as Unitarian Universalists, we can be exemplary in our UU faith by adopting the principles, especially the 8th principle, but also keeping the 7 principles in the forefront of what we do in our daily life. And I think this work that we're talking about now is a way of expanding that. So
Yes.
thanks for that question.
Yeah, it's almost countercultural because what we're saying is that we are no longer going to take it for granted. We're going to be very deliberate and intentional in building the beloved community.
Right.
That's a faith that I'd want to be a part of.
Well, that leads me to my next question, Paula, which is, what is the meaning of being a community of communities that you mentioned in your bio?
Yes. So churches traditionally operate on the idea of church as a family. So family is a powerful metaphor in churches, not just our churches, but denominations, probably in many parts of the world, certainly in this country. And I don't think that we have really examined that metaphor and to take a look at whether or not it limits us. Does it limit our capacity? Does it limit our welcome? And so I am proposing that we change our identity by seeing Unitarian Universalist churches as a community of communities, living our mission in the world and working to build the beloved community. We already are a community of communities. These communities in our congregations fuel the church, sustain the church. We have change in ministry, at various periods in the life of the church, but the communities are pretty consistent. And so just to give you a little more context, all churches have music communities. We've listened to yours today, or your worship community. We have our religious education communities. Many churches have a strong young adult community, senior communities. These are communities that function in the church. BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, maybe mindfulness communities. So the communities already exist in the church. The community of communities as an idea moves that to the center of our awareness. So when we put the 8th principle together with the community of communities as a concept, it really is, it's almost a formula. It's the beginning of a blueprint for cultural change in our congregations. And I really think that we need this for the future. We Unitarian Universalists are up to something big. And the family is a small tent metaphor to describe what we talk about as something universal, but we didn't examine it. And this was right under our nose the whole time. We just didn't see it until now. I'll add too, I think that the saying that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the country, I actually think that's because churches use family as the metaphor. And families are closed systems. They really weren't designed for inclusion and for the complexity of life as we understand it.
That's a brilliant way of understanding and changing our perceptions of that. Thank you. How have you seen people's hearts and minds changed as a result of churches adopting the eighth principle?
It's most visible in the eighth principle learning community. We meet once a month on Zoom. In fact, this month is our second anniversary. There is so much energy in that community. People are excited about this. There's a lot of support for each other. There's a lot of exchange of ideas and practices that are being developed. So this is where I'm seeing that change in hearts the most. Plus, we get to invite people in. For example, in December, we invited 4 ministers to come together to talk about what it means to minister in an eighth principle congregation. That's the first time this has ever been a public conversation. So this is all pretty new. It's still young, but they talked about how important it was. There are people who send me emails and they are asking, can you tell me, I'm about to move, relocate. Can you tell me if there's a congregation in this area that has already adopted the eighth principle? For some people, this is a preference. It's what they're looking for. Our minister in the First Unitarian Church in Honolulu said, if you want to attract people under 40, you need to adopt the eighth principle. This is the world that young people live in, that they grew up in. So we're talking about our congregations really taking this seriously and being willing to make the church reflect as much as possible the communities that we are in. There's a lot more that I could share with you, but I invite anyone in your congregation who is interested to join in with the eighth principle learning community. And this is an ongoing conversation. It is not unusual for us to have 200 people in a meeting. That's the kind of excitement that's taking place.
Right, and I've sat in on a couple of those meetings, and I'll probably sit in on more. And after this, I'm going to ask you offline to, I guess, connect me with those 4 ministers that you had dialogue with, and perhaps I can join them and study myself.
That would be great. Well, let me add, and we've heard since then, since December, we've heard from 3 others. So just to let you know, there are many. And today, before you take your vote, we actually have 125 adoptions of the eighth principle. And what's very significant about that, thank you, is up until by the end of June 2020, we had 29. And we were pretty excited about that. It's still, that's how young this is. But in the last program year, from June 2020 to June 2021, that number went up to 117 in 1 year. I expect this year to be very similar. So it just is an exciting time, and it's a great time for change.
How would adopting the eighth principle align with the Uuclc's mission of being a transformative force of love, compassion, and justice in Las Cruces?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I want to turn it around to you.
I know you would try that. Don't even try it. Don't try it.
You know the congregation and you know Las Cruces. So what do you see in terms of the eighth principle and how it will transform the congregation and its relationship with the community there?
Well, I believe that it makes us or encourages us to be more intentional. As I said about exemplary faith, it has to do with putting your mind and your heart into something and actually living according to that versus just saying the words as if they are kind of rote memory. So I would see the eighth principle as giving us marching orders, if you would, or some type of mandate or charge that says we're going to now begin to align all of our work in the church in accordance with the principle and target outcomes that would be also aligned with the eighth principle.
Yes. And as we do that, we will become known for doing that. And so it'll change our the vision that we have of ourselves. In fact, I can tell you, I'm working with a lot of different congregations, and people are revisioning Unitarian Universalism. It's pretty exciting. And that's why I say we're just starting to scratch the surface. You know, I'll spend a few hours with a congregation and we get into this conversation and people are talking a whole new way about Unitarian Universalism. Well, what happens when that is normal across most of our congregations? We will have changed who we are in the world and how people see us. And that really is worth the investment.
Mhm. Well, I know that you have offered to facilitate a workshop for us to help us really get deep into the eighth principle and what it means. So what I want to ask for now, until we have that workshop, which we plan to do, is what are the next steps beyond adopting the eighth principle and what's involved in helping the congregation come alive after that eighth principle is a part of all of our principles?
Yeah, I love the way you asked that question. The adoption of the eighth principle is the easy part, right? Living it is where our challenge and our growth will be. Once congregations have adopted the eighth principle, then it becomes a lens for them to look at their programming and their systems. We encourage congregations to work at grounding the various parts of the congregation in the eighth principle. I heard you mention that, or someone mentioned it earlier today. And so how does worship reflect the 7th and 8th principles, right? What about governance? And we just had a great session on last Wednesday, hearing from some members of boards who are looking at practices and policy changes that align the board's work more with the 8th principle. What about religious education? There's some great work happening in some congregations around that alignment. And so every part of the congregation then should be asking itself, how are we beginning to understand the 8th principle and live it out? And again, we are not going to have the answers right away because we don't know what we still have to learn, but we all can get started. We should at some point, relatively soon, go back and take another look at our mission. Does the mission reflect the 8th principle? And many of them probably do. You might want to make some changes. What about our covenant? You know, is our covenant consistent with our new sense of accountability? Congregations should be looking at widening the circle of concern to see which of the recommendations in the commission's report can be applied to the congregation. So there are many things that we can do, and there's a lot of support and suggestions coming from various congregations. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything.
Well, along those lines of accountability, I have time for one more question. But before I ask that last question, I wanted to just give a shout out to our two team leaders who are not in the sanctuary, but deserve recognition, because if I don't do it now, I'll forget. So it's Shirley Davis and Rod Souter. So let's give them some love for doing the work they're doing. The last
Yeah.
question does deal with accountability, Paula, and is what criteria or metrics might congregations use to monitor and inform them whether adopting the eighth principle is making a difference? And if you have any examples of measuring sticks that you can share with us, we'd appreciate hearing some.
Yeah. So I think it's a little early for us to be doing measuring sticks. Let me say a bit about assessments. I have a slightly different take, I think. If we take assessments as we usually, I think, understand them, a list of criteria, a list of questions that we then rank or measure. I am wondering if we do that now, might we be reinforcing the existing institutional structure? I'm really beginning to wonder that, because that way of thinking comes out of, traditional institutional culture, right? I think that there's some other ways for us to assess ourselves, especially while we are so early in the process. This should be a time of understanding where we are, creativity, exploration. And so keep this in mind. If you are interested in the eighth principle and the community of communities, I just think that that kind of measurement is too early. I think we need to have a little better understanding of what the community of communities offers in terms of a structural change. And I don't mean the building itself, but the way we begin to imagine our relationships with each other and our ministry to the internal communities in particular and external communities as well. In light of that, we haven't even developed an assessment for that kind of work. And when we do the workshop, I'll introduce to you a tool that'll help you to do assessment that's not based on criteria that's already set, but it's more based on bringing everyone into a common conversation and us beginning to understand our relative position in that conversation, so that we can think collectively and creatively about how we move forward in a different future. When I think about the eighth principle in particular, part of the power of it is that it's something that all of us can embrace. So there's this power in our collective action. And I think it will not just point us in a new direction, but I think it's going to pull us into a new future. So we can't quite measure that yet, because we're still developing a concept of what that means.
Right. Well, I appreciate your nuanced understanding of that and guiding us in a different direction with regard to how we do the work in the future. And I want to thank you for your wisdom today and being with us from DC and taking time to collaborate with the people of Las Cruces. And we look forward to working with you down the road, and we'll see you in the service later.
Thank you. And let me say, I wish you well on your vote. And so I'll be watching my phone so you can text me the results, okay?
Will do.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
We have been worshiping in our refurbished sanctuary for almost 2 months. We are currently practicing indoor masking and social distancing on our church campus in order to help end the spread of COVID-19 and its variants. And we are also continuing to stream each service in order to include as many people as possible. As a community, faith, and generosity, we weathered more than a year and a half beginning last March, during which no services were held in person. Many of the church's expenses continued during the past 19 months, and some will increase as we reopen and expand services and programs. It is vitally important for the ongoing work and health of the church that those of us who are able to fulfill our financial pledges for 2021. All through the pandemic, we continued support of organizations identified by the Social Justice Committee as recipients for our Change for Change program. The recipient for this quarter is Seroptimist International of Las Cruces, which is part of a global women's service organization. Their mission is to provide women and girls access to the education and training they need to achieve economic empowerment. Our local Seroptimist Club supports women's education in southern New Mexico with their Dream It, Be It award and Live Your Dream awards that provide financial support for educational programs beyond high school. The Dream It, Be It Career Support Conference, sponsored by Seroptimist International, teaches high school girls enduring life skills. You can make your pledge or donate to Change for Change by putting checks and change in the basket, which will soon be passed, by sending your checks to the church, or by using the Give link on the church's website. In the words of John Saxon, let us now give freely and generously, an offering to sustain and strengthen our shared religious community, a community of memory, hope, faith, and love. For we are now the keepers of its flame that burns for justice, its dream of beloved community, its vision of a world made whole. If you are joining this worship service, are looking for a spiritual home, and are sympathetic with Unitarian Universalist values and principles, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces may be the place for you. We believe that when you become a member, you are entering into a warm and deep relationship with the church and all of our members and friends. You are becoming a part of something much bigger than any of us. You are becoming a part of a movement to change our community and our world. There are several routes to membership. Speak with the minister after an in-person service, call the church and leave a message about your interest, and a member of the membership committee will call you back. Or if you are using Zoom, you can sign the virtual membership book through the link in the electronic order of service.
Our closing hymn is Come and Go With Me to That Land Where I'm Bound. And I'm going to invite you to rise in body or spirit. We're going to clap, and I will lead the clapping because friends don't let friends clap on the wrong beats. So sometimes it's helpful to clap like this. Drop out the knees. All right, I'll help you with that in just a second. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. There I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. Be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Justice in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Singing in that land.
In closing, perhaps one day the strength of our faith will be measured by how well we are able to actualize the beloved community, as it is stated in the 8th principle. When we find spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. May it one day be so. Amen. I don't. Can you hear me now? No?
Give us 1 second.
Okay. How about now? Yay. Okay. In closing, perhaps one day the strength of our faith will be measured by how well we are able to actualize the beloved community, as it is stated in the 8th principle. When we find spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. May it one day be so. Amen.
Amen. Would you please join me in saying the words to extinguish the flame? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are done. Thank you.
We can do business. So I'll officially call this meeting to order. And I'll ask our minister, Reverend Dr. Kalani Kachela, to light the chalice for us.
Hello, everyone. Our opening words are written anonymously. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. We gather this hour as a people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our request for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to give you a quick opening statement as to the purpose of this meeting, but I think most of you have learned a great deal up to this point. Today, we are meeting to ask our members to adopt and promote the 8th principle. By adopting this principle, we'll covenant with one another that we stand strong behind that Black and Brown Lives Matter sign we have in our front yard. That's good. I think participation is welcome if you want to. All right. We agree to live that value. We agree to take actions individually and collectively to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. And we commit to building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. With a positive outcome today, we would join more than 100, in fact, she said 127 congregations who have already approved the 8th principle. And they are speaking out and taking actions. That's the exciting thing about this particular principle, is it encourages not only us to state and affirm our beliefs, but take action. Our 8th principle team that you've heard about and our multicultural, they were multicultural awareness group. I think someone suggested their multicultural study and action group. And I like that even better. Along with our minister and our Sunday services committee have led us to this point. So please help me recognize them for their efforts. These hardworking groups and your board of trustees believe that the time is right for us to join in this work. Please approve UUCLC's adoption of the 8th principle today. And now I invite Jane Ash, a hardworking member of both the 8th principle team and the multicultural group, to come forward and introduce a motion.
This morning, I move that our congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces, adopt the 8th principle as it has been stated this morning in multiple times, multiple ways, as the additional principle that our church abides by in terms of living our faith.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Now that has been moved by Jane Ash and seconded by a Board of Trustee Roy Vandera, I will open discussion. Because we only have one microphone, I think it would be best for you to come up here if you have a point to make or a question to ask. And that it'll facilitate that. If you stand up and speak loudly, the people on Zoom might not hear you. So if you would be willing to do that, are there folks who want to say anything about this vote before we decide to call the question? Joel. Well, I didn't hear it, but it was one word. What was the word? Duh. The word was duh. Are there other things that people want to? Are there other things that people want to say or ask? That includes the folks on Zoom. If anybody has a hand up or a thing that they feel they need to say. I know we just heard a whole lot. So. David and Ginny are asking. I can do that, although I don't know what happened to my copy of it. Can you put a slide up? So, yeah, we do have a slide, but okay, here's the 8th principle. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. Now, that's not the 8th principle. That's the beginning of every principle. And here it is, journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Other questions? No. We good? Are you ready to vote? Yes. All right. So here's Mark. This is our treasurer, Mark Sukantra.
I just wanted to, there are 3 people who were not on the list, but I feel they are members and have asked if they can also vote. And they are Jason Galbraith, who's in the choir, and
Oh, yes.
Matthias
Yes, he
Matthias.
just signed vote.
and Tamara.
And Tamara.
So
I think Tamara's voting for.
All right, so
she's on the list.
what I would have to ask you to do, I think we can do this by acclamation if you're comfortable, to suspend that. There's a bylaw that has a requirement of a certain number of months of membership. I think we're going to do some changing to the bylaws. That's one of them I expect to change, but it is still there. So would someone be comfortable moving that we suspend that particular bylaw to allow these people to vote? Katie Fitzgerald made that move, and there's a second from Tom, of course, Tom. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Shall I just call the question? Are there any, okay,
No.
all those in favor signify. All right, any no votes? Any
Oh,
abstentions?
Susan, this is
Thank
Tom
you.
Dormady.
Thank you.
Tom Dormady, you can't. Susan, this is Tom Dormady. I was having trouble getting my mute button to go, but you cannot suspend a bylaw.
Well, I thought you told me I could do that.
No, you can't suspend a bylaw. You could suspend some other kind of standing rule, but not a
Okay,
bylaw.
all right.
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead with the vote. I'm sorry about that. I consider you members. I'm happy you're here. I deeply appreciate it. And we'll change the bylaws, what we'll do. So that will.
Sometime.
So, all right. Okay, so how the voting will go is we gave you your ballot and we want you to write yes, no, or abstain on this. Then they're going to collect it the way we collect our offerings each week. Meanwhile, the Zoom group, if you've participated in a vote with us, you know that they will have a polling question posted a second time for people who have 2 folks in the same computer. So it may take a couple of minutes, but we will collect this. And then Dave Steele has a related announcement. So once we get the votes collected and they're counting them, Dave will tell you something I think you might be interested in taking action. One thing you can take action in right away. All right, so if you will, let's give people a chance to write before you begin to collect. So go ahead and write yes, no, or abstain on your 3x5 card. Marie.
President Susan, just to clarify, the folks on on Zoom's votes will also be counted and tallied against the in person.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yep, that's going to happen. Does anyone need anything to complete their vote? Y'all have pens, y'all have cards? Does anyone need more time? Just raise your hand. No, I was going to have them collect here. You guys can do your thing and we'll announce the votes once everything's done and Dave's made his announcement. All right. John Seeley and Mark's a contract. John's a Board of Trustee member. Mark is Board of Trustee and Treasurer. And they will collect your votes and count them. All right. So now allow Dave Steele make his announcement while they're counting up the ballots and waiting for the same to happen on Zoom.
Well, it's a good thing that you all are easily entertained because I am the vote counting entertainment for today. Okay. Many of you may have seen this plea from me over the past few weeks because it's been posted in announcements and in the like. But I think that it's important to communicate with everybody as often as possible. The eighth principle that we're voting on today, and I'm confident that we're going to adopt, calls upon us to not only believe and talk about the principles that are involved in that particular statement, but to take action. And I have an action now that we all can take related to the spirit and the letter of the eighth principle. As you all know, there is a sizable segment of our population right now in this country, and even in our state, that would have us deny the role of race in our history, that would have us downplay the significance of racism in our current society. The New Mexico Department of Public Education is in the process of reviewing and revising its guidelines for K through 12 curricula in the instruction in history and in the social studies that intends to provide our students with an honest, fact and evidence-based curriculum in history, and to give them an opportunity to explore the role of diversity in their own lives and in the lives of their fellow citizens. The Department of Public Education is taking community statements, public statements, up until the 12th of November. And what I would like to ask people to do is to send an email, a letter, or make a call, and I have information about how you can do that, to the department to let them know that you support the guidelines that they are proposing, again, to provide our children with an honest, balanced, and evidence-based accounting of our own history and our current society. So I have a copy of the letter that has already been put out that I'm happy to give you, that has contact information. And if you just raise your hands after I sanitize mine, I'll bring it around to you. Thank you. Yes, question? Oh, okay.
For people on Zoom, was everybody able to respond to the poll in the poll? Good.
All right.
Yes.
Yes? Terrific. All right. So we'll bring your totals to them after they finish counting this. One thought that I had, oh, yes. Ah, okay. That's good. By the way, and this is our newest member, signed the book this morning, and we're happy to. We're very, very happy to have you here, and you may have noticed he's a formidable presence in the choir. One thought that I had while I listened this morning, and that I've thought about many times, is Dave gave us a first step. That's fun. We go out of here going, yes, we've done something. But the thought I had was the idea behind the eighth principle does not apply only to someone who looks and sounds differently or is a different color even. It could start right here, right now, by trying to more deeply listen and better understand the people who are sitting right here in front of me. And there's so much to learn and so much to do in a loving, multicultural, diverse is a great word. There are people here who may feel marginalized for some reason we can't even guess. And if we're truly going to start living this, we can start today. So that was my thought. How are we doing? We're getting there?
In here, we had 37 yes, 0 no's, and 0 abstains.
All right. Okay. And Jen, when they get their count up here, we'll add the two together for our records and our minutes of this meeting. We need the total number. We'll do that. It's okay. Well, no, you add the two together. It's great. When we thought about how we would, oops.
Yes.
Go ahead.
0, no, 0 abstains.
All right. And 37 and 15, 52, 0. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's amazing. I'm so pleased that we are going to work on this. And the groups that were referenced are not going to go into retirement. They will be helping to plan not only the workshop, which I think we'll do sometime, we haven't set it up yet, sometime early spring, sort of when it's comfortable and available for all of us and works with her schedule. In addition to that, we're going to have some small group sessions online and in person to talk about some of the key principles in widening the circle of concern. It's a complicated and complex book, so we will be taking some issues to start with. Jan. Absolutely, come up.
Beginning the end of November and continuing for a few months, Las Cruces is going to receive 100 Afghans and 250 other refugees from throughout the world. We need people who are open to diversity, to step forward and assist these people in getting settled in our community. I have 8 volunteers so far. I need more. Please let me know if you're able to help. There are multiple ways to help. Donating household goods or just money, assisting in getting a cable established in their residences so that the kids can progress in school, and then being cultural mentors on a team where you show people around the city, let them know what's available here, and talk to them in English so that they can practice their English. So let me know if you can help, please.
Thank you, Jan. All right. I'd like to recognize the people who helped with the meeting. I've already mentioned John and Mark and Sally Atkinson and other Board of Trustee participated in certifying the Zoom vote. And I appreciate their help. We have Sarah Reyes, who is helping us today and also training Michaela Pinkham. Michaela, would you wave from the back? Okay. Right. And as Sarah at the end of the month moves on to a full-time job here in the community, Michaela will be taking on her responsibilities, and we're just delighted. Sorry to lose you, Sarah, but we appreciate it. And we're happy to have you, Michaela. We'll look forward to that. I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved, and there's a second. Okay, and the so moved was from? Okay. Did you get that, Sally? She needed to say it again? Okay, all right. Then all those in favor signify. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We have an extinguishing of the flame, and then it's done. So I adjourn the meeting, and Kalani, would you take care of the flame? You want me to say some words? Or you have words? We extinguish this, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Gosh, it.
Looking for your words? You looking for something?
My words.
You have them.
My words.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks, Annette.
That was great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well done.
I'm so sorry.
Now the service begins.
I know. And that now it's come the hard part, right? Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you.
But I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.